James Bond in video game history has had some great highs and some lows. You've got GoldenEye, which had critical acclaim for its gameplay, and then you had 007 Legends, which was just a Call of Duty clone. It has been passed from studio to studio, from Rare to EA and then to Activision. I'm a big fan of the movies, I own every single film, but I've never really been engaged with the games. Before First Light, the first and last 007 game I played was Quantum of Solace, which treated Bond as a mass murderer. You were just going from corridor to corridor mowing enemies down. I've always wanted a 007 game that can match the films, and we finally have one. The best thing they could have done was not tie it to any of the previous films. This gave them the opportunity to start afresh and put their own spin on it. As you know, IO Interactive have created the Hitman and Kane and Lynch series. The Hitman series has always had a consistent level of quality. It's had sprawling locations which are sandboxes with multiple ways for you to assassinate your target. And the Kane and Lynch series has had great action. All things considered, it seemed like a match made in heaven. You play as Bond, who hasn't got his 00 status yet. He's not even a spy, he serves in the Royal Navy. The game wastes no time in giving you a taste of what the next 20 hours will consist of. The series regulars are here, you have Q, M and Moneypenny as well as some new faces. IO have done a tremendous job making you care about each of the characters, particularly the two other recruits who you'll be spending the first few hours of the game with. Patrick Gibson stars as James Bond. He does a fantastic job, in my opinion he's up there with the best. Like the more recent Daniel Craig, he's arrogant and has an air of superiority, but he's not as cold and shut off. The locations aren't as large as they are in Hitman. You also don't have as much freedom to achieve your goal. You are plonked onto a map with a rough idea of what you need to do. One of the first areas is a nightclub in London where you're meant to be having some R&R with your team members. Of course, MI6 had other plans. You were given a phrase and have to locate someone who matches that description. It's a fun little mission. You fight a jealous boyfriend in the bathroom while trying to dodge the advances of his girlfriend. At one point you have to get up to a VIP lounge, but of course you aren't on a list. One of the ways to get access is by eavesdropping on a conversation and finding out there's a way to it behind the stage by climbing up the scaffolding. The locations are characters within themselves. They all seem like living, breathing places, just like in Hitman. Another location in the early part of the game is a hotel in Slovakia, which is hosting a chess match. You need to get past the security gate. One of the ways they did this was by locating a lighter, turning on a hose to distract someone and stealing it. I could then set fire to a bin, which would mean the guard who was blocking my path would go to investigate, and now I could hop over the balcony, make my way to a drain pipe which gave me access to the top floor of the building. Unlike Hitman, you can't drag bodies around and disguise yourself as whoever you want. It seems disguises are hard to find. Throughout the whole game, that was the only mission where I could find a disguise. The stealth aspect is fine, don't come into it expecting Splinter Cell. It revolves around you taking cover, taking down enemies and distracting them or luring them. If you are caught, you do have a few options before it turns to kicking their heads in. You can convince them that you belong here, which is funny to see the different reasons that Bond gives. You can leave or you can fake surrender. If combat does kick off, you can contain the situation before it goes guns blazing by defeating all the enemies who are attacking you before they call for backup. Sometimes it's a bit odd, you've had a full-scale, loud fight with multiple enemies, but there is a group of them in the next room who never heard you. The enemies also aren't very smart. You can have two enemies in close proximity. You distract one by hacking a radio so he walks over to it to investigate. The other guy turns his back. You then loudly drag the investigating enemy over a box, punch him, but the other guy never notices that in the space of 15 seconds that the other guy's gone missing. But I suppose that's just video game logic for you. You can't blindly turn into a mentalist and shoot everyone on sight either. You can only do so when they have intent to kill, which gives you the license to kill. When it does kick off though, the shooting feels snappy and responsive, but it's not got any depth. You point, shoot, spray someone and move on to your next target. However, even in the gunfights, there is humour. Run out of ammo? No problem, yeet your gun at them. See a mug sitting there? Launch it at your attack. Want another gun? Shoot it out of an enemy's hands and then take it from them. The hand-to-hand is where the game excels. You can throw enemies over tables, balconies, shove their heads into walls. There can be some clunky bits too, but overall the melee combat is brilliant. You have various tools at your disposal, with more being unlocked as you progress. You have a Q-Watch, which lets you hack electronics, a dart phone, which as your guest fires darts at a target, which will make them stumble over to the nearest bin to vomit, which allows you to get past. You are limited to what you can bring with you on each mission. You don't have free reign to bring everything with you, but gadgets all make sense and they harken back to the earlier Bond films, when they were more wacky. The story isn't going to blow your mind, but at least it did a good job at keeping me engaged. It has relevant themes that is going on in the modern world, like how AI can replace people, what happens when AI is relied on too much, and what happens if it makes mistakes. I appreciate IO crafting a story that has modern day relevance. The bad guys are pretty one note. You have one guy who thinks he's doing the right thing even though he's most definitely not, and then you have the psycho son who just wants to murder people for the sake of it. The whole training chapter also sticks with me because it is very reminiscent of the first Kingsman movie. There is also a brilliant training montage. The driving is very clunky, sometimes the slightest turn can send you into a wall, and if you crash into an oncoming vehicle, they seem to be as light as a feather, so just bounce out of the way. There aren't too many driving sections though to cause annoyance, but as a spectacle I did enjoy them. The game runs on Unreal Engine 5 and I personally had no performance issues. I had everything cranked up to the highest setting and DLSS set to quality. At most I was getting 120 FPS and at the least I was getting about 80. The game looks great, the main characters are detailed, obviously the random NPCs are lacking in features but that's understandable due to how many there can be. The environments also look great and the soundtrack is typical Bond. Lana Del Rey sang the opening song. When I first heard it on the BAFTAs I wasn't into it, but after listening to it more I have to say that it's grown on me. Outside of the story you can dive into Tac Sim, where you can complete various scenarios for rewards like outfits from the films. This is perfect if you are into this sort of thing and can easily spend hours upon hours completing every single scenario. It's probably how they'll keep the game updated going forward. For me however it's not my kind of thing. I did 3 scenarios and then never touched it again, but it seems like IO have put a lot of effort into it rather than being a side piece, which is nice. For me however it's not my kind of thing. I did 3 scenarios and then never touched it again, but it seems like IO have put a lot of effort into it rather than it being a side piece, which is nice. It can be accessed while on the main menu or when you are in QLab. Frustratingly though, when I was in the Tac Sim I wandered around for 5 minutes trying to figure out how to leave, but it turns out you can only leave by exiting to the main menu, which is a bit jarring. You'll also notice there's a lot of product placement. You've got Aston Martin, Omega, Jaguar, Land Rover, Triumph and Coke for some reason. There's one section where you have to drive a Land Rover and no joke they never refer to it as a car. They say I'm getting a Land Rover, they've destroyed the Land Rover, or my personal favourite, Hell Hafner Fury like a woman scorned for Land Rover. What followed was a section of around 10 minutes where you were driving the Land Rover through salvaged ships. It seemed very out of place and almost like Land Rover wanted it to be included to show you how good the cars are. First Light costs $59.99, the game is out on PC, PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. It's not a perfect game, but if you like James Bond and launching mugs at people, this is a solid recommendation. There is also a story DLC being released soon. Unfortunately, IO might not be developing the sequel as it might be Amazon internally, but we'll have to wait and see. If IO don't revisit the series, at least they can take what they learned here and apply it to the next Hitman game.